This enterprising young man from India got accepted for PhD at both Oxford and Cambridge, and he has also been offered a fully paid scholarship. He humbly says the videos on this channel help him achieve that. I'm delighted to hear that, although I think he credits me for much more than I deserve, and truly he owes these successes to his own hard work. But let's hear from him directly.
I'm very pleased to have you after this long correspondence. You initially wrote to me to say that you were a follower of the channel and it had helped you receive an acceptance to Cambridge. So tell us your story.
Yeah. So
introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Definitely. Myself, Varad Vishwarupe. I hail from India, and I have previously worked at Microsoft Research as well as Amazon R&D. And when I started this endeavor of applying to colleges and all, I was obviously searching for resources where I could.
So how long between your after high school you went to university first, and then you worked for Microsoft, and then you worked for
4 years at MIT Pune, which is known as Maharashtra Institute of Technology, for my undergrad, and thereafter 4 years for my education, the bachelor's, because in India we have 4-year
bachelor,
engineering bachelor's, and thereafter 3 years at Microsoft Research and in India, and 4 years at Amazon R&D, which was my last stint. And I led the Alexa AI research team for India, like a team of 6 people, including interns. So that was my last stint, and I have obviously worked in the areas of human-computer interaction, AI, and something that actually caught my eye was the way you presented your material when I searched for resources. So last December, I was in the phase of writing to people, getting to know their work and everything. That is when your thumbnail caught my eye, to be very honest, and I must congratulate you on that, because those are very, very thought-provoking thumbnails. And when I went to it...
Which one are you thinking of?
It was with Professor Simon. Professor Simon from the NLP group.
Simon Teufel.
Yes, Simon Teufel. Because since I have worked in NLP quite a lot for Alexa AI, so that is what something caught my eye. And then there was one student interview from Trinity. Undergrad student, and also about should computers scientists need to know programming, and should they be good at it, and a series of 2-3 videos on that. So
if I may ask you, what prompted you to go from having a successful career in some of the most prestigious internet giants in the world to wanting to go back to university? Why did you want to do that?
The first and foremost thing that I really wanted to do was, and that actually motivated this decision, was the freedom that I get when I actually work with someone who is a stalwart in the field, like your good self. So that was the first decision. And secondly, when it comes to career avenues, so the next post that I am targeting, all the research scientists post at, let's just say, a plethora of companies like Google, DeepMind, or even in academia for that matter, like being a professor, they all require a PhD as a prerequisite. So these two were the reasons, and the utmost reason was that actually I wanted freedom for my research. Here I am doing the bidding of those companies. I mean, I'm working on something really interesting, which is impacting millions of people positively. But obviously, I'm not working on something that is closer to me or dearer to me. So that was something which I really thought motivated my decision.
And so I'm curious to hear, what is the thing that is dear to your heart, research-wise, that you could not do in a company?
Yeah, first and foremost, it is actually coinciding with your work I'm just seeing a poster here, raising a new generation of cyber defenders, which actually coincides with my research interest on ethical AI. So I have actually been a witness to things around the world where there have been a lot of cyber attacks, plus there have been ethical AI debates. So ethical AI is something which is very dear to me, and human-centered AI. I feel that from my years of experience in the industry, that AI should not just be fast and snappy, it should be human-centered and human-aligned in nature. And for that, we need to first understand what it means to be a human, rather than what it means to program a computer. So these two things, ethical AI and human-centered AI, are very close to my heart. And then there are subfields like explainable AI, interactive ML, and your fields of forte such as cyber attacks and how to defend against them. So all these culminated into this decision, and that is what is my end goal, to make computers human-centered in nature. So
okay, very good. And now you have been accepted to Cambridge to do just that?
Yeah, to Cambridge, and for that matter, I met yesterday Professor Alan Blackwell, since you were not here. And just to tell you that I have also been accepted to Oxford in Sir Nigel Shadbolt's group of human-centered computing, and also at Cambridge, but not for the PhD in CS, for the MPhil ACS, and for the PhD engineering, I am accepted with Professor Mohammad Zaki in the
So
engineering
you
department.
got all these acceptance offers. Which one are you going to pursue?
So it's a very difficult choice and a difficult question, because it's like picking between let's just say Newton and Plato, for example, or Plato and Socrates. It's a very perplexing predicament, I would say. But I think Cambridge suits my research interests really good. And at Oxford, I have won the Institute for Ethics in AI scholarship. It's a fully funded ride there, and here I'm awaiting on some funding currently. But I'm sure that even while corresponding with Professor Blackwell yesterday, he said no matter which institution you go to, you'll always be very dear to me. And he told me to convey to you that he's a very dear colleague of mine. He said about you.
He's
And
very what?
he said you are a very dear colleague of his. Actually, you are a very dear colleague of his since 20 years. He knows you since I think 20 odd years, and he told me that no matter where you try to choose and go, we will always research things together. So currently, I'm just waiting on the Cambridge funding.
That's cool. Oh yes. So you've got the academics acceptance from various places.
Yeah,
But
and a
before
scholarship
making a
acceptance.
decision, you want to know.
Yeah,
Get
and
the
scholarship
funding.
acceptance from Oxford.
Okay.
There I have been
Well,
accepted in the
congratulations, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. There I have been accepted into to the HCC group led by Sir Nigel Shadbolt, and my immediate supervisor would be Professor Marina Jarutka. So I am sure you know her. So yeah.
Which of these places do you think gives you the best chance to do exactly what you want?
To be extremely honest, both are really good, but Cambridge has an edge due to one particular thing, and that is the Silicon Fen here, because you have been affiliated with so many companies. So whatever I'm more interested in the applied side of research. Even my the title of my research would be reinventing the future of smart homes. So it coincides with your smart homes, yeah. Because I worked in Alexa and I firsthand have experienced what are the repercussions of not adhering to certain guidelines which these companies flout left, right, and center. So, it would be my absolute honor to do it in conjunction with an industrial partner, or probably put it to use through an internship, whatever I have learned. So Cambridge actually suits better.
Do you think that the big
we have
companies you
here,
work with
yeah,
would want you back after you have a master or PhD from Cambridge, Oxford, and so on, or would you want to go, by yourself with a startup, starting your own company, or working with a smaller company? What is your ambition?
Yeah, I mean, if the role suits me, because nowadays something that is in vogue is having roles such as AI ethicist. This is something which I have recently found, that you don't only become an AI research scientist, but you work in the AI ethics field also. So if there's a role in these companies which actually suits my forte, because Professor Marina had told me one very good anecdote which I shared with Professor Blackwell yesterday. She said PhD is a cake that you don't cut horizontally, you cut it deep. So when I reach the tipping point, whichever company is actually working on something that interests me, I'll be extremely happy to do that. Or else I'll be based here as a postdoctoral researcher with you, if that suits our timelines when I do that. So academia is not something that I want to do. It would be industry, but in the niche that I want to explore.
And are you thinking of maybe making your own company at some point?
Yes, definitely, sir. Definitely.
What kind of company do you envisage yourself in? Is it something that sells products, or something that sells services? Or?
No, products. Obviously, products, and I also have a product in mind. If I may tell you about it in brief. Whenever we try to program things, I mean, I met the Turing awardee Dr. Martin Hellman few years ago. I'm very sure that you know him personally.
Of course.
Yeah. So he had told me one thing 8 years 8 years ago at a conference, and he said, whenever you want to develop AI, make sure that AI doesn't become an antagonist to the humanity and human race. So those words kind of they have left an indelible inspiration on me. So I personally feel, sir, that when it comes to my areas of interest, or like you asked about the what kind of research would you like to pursue and what kind of niche. So my aim is to develop a moral engine, basically. So it would be like, if you put in a piece of code in that particular moral engine, it would be a piece of software, obviously, it would be a product. It will tell you the moral implications of it in a very cultural sensitive kind of an environment. For example, what is acceptable in British culture might not be acceptable in Indian culture. So the cultural definitions change, and hence the moral codes change, which Professor Blackwell has written a book on recently. So my end goal is to develop a moral engine, or an ethical engine, which would make sure that while the program is being, engineered by the software engineers, they should have those ethical repercussions that could take place, or ethical implications in mind, before actually programming something that could go out of hand. Because I have personally worked on the Alexa TM20V large language model. I was one of the persons who actually worked in that team. It's a 20 billion parameter multimodal AI LLM, and I know what can happen if it is trained wrongly. So I would definitely want, even if tomorrow I'm starting a company, the programmers should know there are some ethical responsibilities, there are some ethical AI repercussions that could, endanger the human race. So I would definitely want to work on mitigating such things.
Right. Well, I'm very happy to have a chat with you about these things. As long as you are comfortable, if we make a video out of this, that this goes public before you published your papers, before you file your patents and all stuff, you're happy to talk about all this.
No worries.
Mentioning projects you worked on, you're not shy about any of that.
No, I'm
all right. As long as you're comfortable, I'm fine. So what I would ask is something like this, a very interesting idea, a moral engine for AI. How could you, once you built your first prototype, how can you evaluate? How can you tell if it's any good?
Yeah. So the first thing would be an element from HCI that I have learned over the years, because my research has coincided at this point of time. So I have over 50 research papers, an Edge index of 10 currently, and 12 international granted patents. So I feel that from all this, if I had to summarize things and all, so I personally feel that it is of paramount importance to actually work on things, ethical AI and the moral engine, and to test them. I would take an element from HCI, which is called Delphi studies, and I discussed this with Professor Blackwell yesterday itself, citing you as a subject for that study, as an expert, because Delphi studies. May I enunciate what Delphi study is? If I may, yeah. Delphi study is basically two experts. There are two experts from a field, and you show them the results of a certain survey, and then they they enunciate and they chalk out what are the important things and how they should have been. So it's like a feedback loop that you get. It's basically a feedback mechanism.
So it's evaluated by comparing with the answer of experts in the field.
In the field, yeah. So for example, if I have to evaluate a paper on cybersecurity, so for cryptography, I'll go to Professor Hellman. For cyber security, I'll come to you. And since you are an authority in this field, I would take into account your subject matter expertise also as a SME, but I'll also take into account the cultural and the university, the context as well, so that we have a very holistic overview of this. So once a certain datum is established for that moral engine for the first prototype in a certain cultural context, and once I get the Delphi study results, then I could compare it with another expert from another cultural background, and then see how it actually coincides and what are the disparities between that.
Right, but I mean, this is certainly a sound way to ground the output of the AI into something that we would trust.
Yes.
But it's. I mean, I'm trying to play devil's advocate, not that I'm thinking.
No,
I just want to drill intellectually.
Please.
So, I mean, I'm nobody, but Professor Hellman, during the war and so on, I mean, you're lucky if you can call him once to give his opinion on something. Not something you can do repeatedly, right? You cannot, run this past him 20 times. So
absolutely.
You get very small number of sample points from experts, but because they're experts,
yes,
you cannot really keep running the feedback loop over and over.
Yes, yes.
So that will this scale to the thing that is then going to answer millions of queries once it's automated and so on. Anyway, I've tried it with Professor Martin Hellman. Yeah, but once.
Yes, once. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that enough to give it some grounding, you think?
No, it is enough to establish the ground principles, sir. That is what I believe. Because obviously we can't give such experts. I mean, they're so hard to come by. I mean, even for you, I have been trying to, we have been trying to basically, come to a consensus about meeting here, me coming to the Cambridge and all. So I think once the ground rules are established, which the expert approves very explicitly, like for example, if Professor Hellman says, this is the kind of public key cryptography that I would like to have, and that's his opinion. That is not like a generalized idea. It's a Delphi study, conclusion that comes from him. Once the ground principles are established, then we can take it from there and see how the models actually adhere to those ground principles. And if the adherence goes haywire after a certain way, which it will based on the training data, we would have corrective mechanisms to actually, course correct them to a point where actually they adhere to what he had said. I mean, this is just about one subject, one expert. So, but morality. I mean, since I have secured a scholarship from the Institute for Ethics in AI, Professor John Tasulas from the institute had asked me during my scholarship interview, how do you define ethics? How do you define ethics? I said ethics are such a ubiquitous thing that what is acceptable in one culture would completely change its definition in another.
Yes.
So we need to start from what is ethics rather than why ethics are needed. Nowadays the debate is about ethical AI, explainable AI, interpretable ML, but it is first about why these things are, what these things are rather than why these things are needed. So once the ground principles are established through a Delphi study,
so do you think that there's
an
element of ethics that transcends all cultures, or that you should specialize for this culture? This is ethical for this culture. It would be totally wrong. But I mean, when I'm in this country, I'll set the dial to this. When I'm in this country, I'll set it.
Yes. There are two things to it, sir. I have surveyed a lot of papers for that. There are general principles which are acceptable and which are pervasive to every culture, such as, for example, killing someone. Killing someone is considered a sin across all cultures, if I'm not wrong. Again, I'm not an expert on this field. This transcends the boundaries of theology, religion, and a plethora of other fields. But killing someone, for example, for the wrong reasons, out of vengeance, or let's just say there's something called greed. In Hinduism also, greed is considered bad in our Indian culture. In English culture, greed is also looked down upon. So there are certain aspects which are called general principles, which are pervasive and they are equal in all ethical contexts. And then there are some, such as, let's just say, having a drink, for example, or Muslims adhere to the halal system of meat production and consumption that they have established. Now that is right in their stride or in their contextual context, but in our probably in Hindu religion that is forbidden basically. So there are two types of it. One is the general principles which we can work upon, because that in itself is a very Herculean task to do Delphi studies. Like tomorrow I'll come to you, I'll ask you, sir, what do you feel about cybersecurity in a Jordanian context, for example. Then we'll establish some ground principles. We'll have a second expert from Jordan, and then we'll segregate that into an LLM moral engine, basically. But for some things which are very specialized in nature, it will take years and years to. This is basically like breaking down the AGI debate. People are thinking about artificial general intelligence. I want to break it down and make it specific in nature.
So even for basic ethical principles such as not killing and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's several wars going on at the moment.
Yes.
Where every side has their own views, and basically in contexts like war, you see dehumanization of the opponent, so that I no longer have to apply the moral code or ethics, or you shall not kill another human, because I see my opponents as subhuman. I see this is just they are not worth of the same consideration as other humans as us. the humans and then the really not human subhumans and so on. And that does happen. I mean, I don't have to cite which conflicts are in every newspaper every day nowadays, but obviously there is this going on.
Yes, indeed.
And so it is maybe idealistic or simplistic to say that there are things everybody agrees on. Yeah, they agree on, but when push comes to shove, they just retune the parameters that they can still do.
Yes, absolutely.
So
they're fine-tuned according to their own interest and vested interests, if I may say so.
Yes.
Basically, the humans are reduced to objects, to numbers, basically. Hundreds were killed, thousands were killed. So, but as humans, and as Professor Hellman had very explicitly told me that he wrote one book, Roadmap for Relationships. And in that, there's a beautiful quote that he has, self-invented and propagated through that book. He says, instead of being furious, just be curious. that is again related to relationships, in the context of relationships. But I found it very, very intriguing because as a person, even I get agitated when, for example, in the office, when I'm working, if an intern doesn't turn out with the work that I had given him, obviously I feel, agitated that, oh my God, we are, giving you so many resources. You asked me for a 2 TB instance of EC2 and I just approved it a couple of days ago and now you haven't done this. But instead of doing that, how about you become curious and see the contextual viewpoint of that particular scenario? So I think the context with a cultural context is the way forward for AI and moral codes and developing the moral engine. And I'm sure there's so much to learn from you because you are basically one of my heroes along with Professor Blackwell, Professor Martin Hellman, because they invented and in fact when I spoke with Professor Hellman, he told me, do you know we invented public key cryptography, me and Whitfield Diffie, we invented it with an accident, like it was an accidental thing. So just like there are accidental millionaires, this was an accidental invention and now it has shaped the entire world. So I feel that if we want to advance the state of the art in computer science and push the horizons, we need to do it together and we need to be curious instead of being furious about something. So that's a takeaway that we can have, definitely.
That's very good. So that's a good vision to pursue.
Yes.
Very, very nice thing.
Yeah.
Now, if we abstract away from your case.
Yes. Sure.
Please. Now you're here, and you've written to me because you've found about my videos something that inspired you. Blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
So, is there something that you could give as advice to other people who might be where you were a while ago? What is the good time to, for example, you like me went to graduate studies as a mature student, not straight on from your bachelor's and master and then PhD and so on, and all and continuous sequence of just university.
Yeah.
You stopped, you did some real work, and then you looked around and said, that's not going to let me do all the things I want to do. Let me go back to school and do something. So first of all, I want to ask you, what is the good time for people to find out what graduate studies are right for them, when they should. I mean, maybe for some people it's right to go straight after university. I don't know. For some others like us, it's better to just view the world first and experience it firsthand before we choose something. How does one find out when's the right time to go for graduate studies or to go for graduate studies at all?
First and foremost, I think it should be a calling that should come from within, because a lot of people that I have mentored a plethora of people, because as you said, I'm a mature student now. I'll be joining after years in the industry. There's a mentality, especially in our country, in India, which I call the neighbor mentality. If the neighbor's kid is going to some school or he's going to some college or some university or some good company, they will definitely want to emulate that. But I think that is wrong. The herd mentality should not be there. First of all, it should be a calling. And for students who are not mature, who are and let's be clear about the term mature, because we both fathom this, but people in India or elsewhere might not know. Mature students are, I think, over the age of 25, if I'm not wrong. who get some experience and then they come to university, or probably they come back. So the first and foremost thing is to,
if I may say,
yeah,
we call a mature student someone who comes to university not straight on from
undergrad,
normal undergraduate,
or
but
postgraduate,
they've done some other stuff and so on. Now, mature actually in English means they have some maturity.
Yes.
There's no guarantee that someone who comes back as a mature student is mature. I mean, I'm not sure I was that mature when I went back to university, but
absolutely, absolutely. So.
we make this thing. So
Yes,
I meant mature student in the kind of official sense of someone who comes
with
not
some
straight
experience,
from the previous degree.
who takes
But-
a detour, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, who takes a detour.
But I take your point, especially as you work on ethical AI, that someone who does go back to do a PhD should actually have some maturity inside to decide
Yes,
that's
yes,
the right
exactly,
thing for me to
exactly,
do.
exactly.
I would quite agree
Yes,
with
yes,
you. Yes.
yes. And to answer your question, people should have a calling, basically, and they should know what they want from the PhD. Because a lot of people are only scratching the surface, and obviously you won't be a world expert, you won't straight away be an Alan Turing after that degree. No, nobody will, exactly. But the calling should be there. And secondly, if you are very much interested in research, if you want to do research, I would say study your professors first, your prospective supervisors, because they are into it for the sake of academic pleasure, and very few people are into it for the sake of money. Professor Blackwell has put it very well on his webpage when I contacted him, that people are into this for the sake of glory and not money. So it is very imperative that you study the professors first, and if you find it is interesting enough that you can study for the next 3 or 4 years in the UK or in the US or other countries, probably 5 or 6 years, then it should be taken as a career choice or pursued as an option. But the calling should be there. If the calling is not there, then the self-motivation dies by the time someone tries to get to their third or second year. So that is something which I would highly suggest, that there should be a there should be a basic amalgam of what you have to do and what is being done at that particular university or the group. Most of the times, like for example, if I come to you, even now when I come to you, we can explore paradigms of scam victims and the psychology of scam victims, which is your area of forte, which is also a poster which is hung here, if it is probably visible, understanding scam victims. So this is something that you probably have done years ago, but there can be a new perspective to it. And to make the prospective supervisor interested in you, you need to give him a kick out of your research proposal. That kick is the most important thing, and that comes out of maturity as well as your overall academic acumen. There's intelligence to it, there's academic preparation, there's skill development. But I feel that it should be a personal decision and not a herd mentality thing. Like, people only see at numbers, okay, you'll get a job of 200,000 pounds after you graduate. That is something very materialistic. You will get it, but one of my former professors, he always says, even if you get all the material things in the world, if you can't have a bolus of food with satisfaction, and if you can't get a night's sleep properly, nothing is useful. Everything is futile. So personally, sir, I feel that it should be a calling, and people should research their professors and the university well, and make sure that the professor gets a kick out of your proposal, because I'm sure you see thousands of proposals and you get hundreds of emails every year. So you should make it stand out. Yeah. And the magic words are squeamish aspirant.
Yes.
For people who understand this context, Professor Stejano has a spam filter. So if you don't send it with these words, your email won't be answered.
So I see you've done your background research.
Yes, yes.
Very good.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So, and if we go further back in time,
yeah,
you did a bachelor in engineering, you
yes,
said, right?
Yes.
So, when you were growing up and you were between the ages of, let's say, 10 and 16, how did you figure out what your calling was? At which point did you decide you wanted to become an engineer?
Yeah, I had a very good influence of my maternal uncle, firstly, because my dad is a PhD and professor of English literature at a university in my hometown, and my mom is a homemaker, so I have a arts and commerce background. I did not have an engineering background except for my maternal uncle. So I used to meet him and he used to tell me all the cool stuff that used to be there.
And he was an engineer?
Yeah, he's an engineer. He graduated from the Indian Institute of Technology, which is...
What kind of engineer?
He's a mechanical engineer. Yeah, and he's a professor now. He's in academia. So he used to come and tell me about these cool things and all. So one fine day, me coming from very humble background and a very grounded kind of a family, my dad took me to another of his friends and he told me that there was a PC, a personal computer, which was being sold at, if I may say in today's terms, 300 GBP. So it's close to 30,000 rupees back in the day. And I was extremely fascinated with computers because I had a grooming. Like we had an option in our school. I was at St. Aloysius High School. So it was an English Catholic convent school in my hometown. So we had an option to choose between either craft and computer science since standard 1. So I chose CS, computer science.
And how old were you then?
So I was barely 6 or 7.
6 or 7? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's very
And we used to just have Windows 98 back in the day, Windows 95, 98, then Millennium. So we used to play games at first, but something that actually stood out for me was whenever I used to do something on the program called Paint, if I used to hover the cursor, something used to be displayed on the screen. That is what was the kick for me, that if I am trying to do something here, I am giving an input, there's an output that is happening and I can tweak that basically through all the tools that I have. So when I went to that friend of my dad's, he told me that there's this offer of having a PC in just 300 GBP, which was a very, unprecedented kind of a price because they were very, heftily priced back in the day. So we got it. My dad got it for me, and I'm still grateful to him after all these years. And when I started exploring everything, like I started with command prompt, and the first command that I wrote was DXDIAG, the direct text diagnostic tool. How to just see what happens when I write something on the CLI, command line interface. I was like, this is cool. I mean, I felt like I am a hacker basically at that point.
So what were you learning from? Did you have a mentor? Did you have books? Did you have
courses? I had books and YouTube and all was fairly new. I'm talking about 2008 in fact. It was fairly new, so I was a bookworm since my childhood. So I had all those books, and there was one book written by Mr. Bill Gates, and it's called The Road Ahead. It's a very wonderful book. I'm sure you must have.
I have it. I don't know if I have it here in my department, but I have it. I read it when it came out.
The Road Ahead. So I was very fascinated by him, and one more influencer, and that is Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple. I mean, I'm not as much inspired by Mr. Jobs as much as I am by Mr. Wozniak, because he's a true engineer. He's a quintessential engineer, I would say. So I read his work, the way he developed Apple 1, 2, Mr. Gates's books, and I was like, fine, I want to make my career in this field itself. There's no other way. But for that, I need to know how to make the computer do my bidding. So I started with a language called Logo, language of graphical operations, first in my childhood. And thereafter I moved to C. We had that old clunky interface of a very bluish command line. I'm sure you remember that. So I started with C, and then I gradually went to C++, and we had something called Flash, HTML Flash back in the day. So I created my first website when I was in my 11th standard. It was like a project. So while doing all these things, I was very fascinated by the fact that whatever I am trying to do, whatever I am envisioning, it is being shown on the monitor. It is being, displayed, and it is something that I can show the entire world.
So, and your mechanical engineer uncle, was he a mentor in the computing part as well?
No, not here. When I started my graduate studies at MIT Pune, which is one of the premier institutions in India, he got me in touch with his best friend who had recently completed his PhD and joined there as a professor. His name is Dr. Mangesh Bedekar, with whom I have had the privilege of authoring 32 papers till now. And he is my, mentor, godfather, primary research guide till date.
And he's a computer scientist?
Yeah, he's a computer scientist. So he told me, you go and meet Mangesh. And the day I met him, it was like a marriage made in heaven, an academic marriage made in heaven. for that matter. So he told me the same things, like, if you want to be the best or if you want to be unique, just follow two things. You need to be extremely passionate about what you want to do, and that should come from within. And I see that spark in you, but you should back it up with your hard work, your diligence, and you should do it until and unless it is finished. You might not get the end result always. You will falter as a researcher. Don't feel that when you do research something, you'll obviously end up being the best. He told me about Newton's Principia Mathematica, and today I'm sitting at Trinity College, Cambridge, where
you should visit
the chapel. Yeah.
The Wren Library. Never mind the chapel. You can see the statue. If you go to the Wren Library,
you
can see the actual manuscript.
Yeah. So he told me that, and he also told me about Srinivasa Ramanujan, whom G.H. Hardy and John Edward Littlewood mentored. So he said, see, talent goes waste when talent is not channelized. So I want you to follow a certain path. I'll give you some assignments, and you do that, and then I'll test you over these. I don't want some, blabbering bullshit about whatever you are trying to do. I want it to be extremely focused and to make sure that research is fruitful. Even if you're trying to change one person's life for the better, if you're trying to make your research productive in a way that it changes lives of people, makes them better, you should definitely do it. So we started with that, and he was the one, in fact, he is the one. And sir, even after all these years, I could have gotten a letter of recommendation from anyone. Like, I have so many contacts now, so many industry stalwarts and international people. I took his LOR for my applications to Oxbridge, and he is the one who actually played a lion's share in my development as a researcher. So my uncle basically redirected me to him, and then from there onwards, all this, started. The process started. So that's
very good. Yeah.
And this happened in my first year of engineering. I started researching in my second semester onwards itself.
So was your engineering course specialized on computing? Or
yes. It's called Information Technology, the course that I did, Bachelor of Engineering in IT. So academically, I was bright. I was following, but I was not going to lectures. To be extremely candid with you, I was not going to theory lectures. I found them extremely boring. I was interested in the practical side of things. So once I started working with Professor Mangesh Bedekar, I thought I need another guide for a specialized thing. So I met second of my mentors and guides. Her name is Dr. Pachi Joshi. So we started working on something that is very, very unique, and the patent that I have on that was cited by Eric Horowitz. I mean, not him, obviously, his team, but Eric Horowitz, the CTO of Microsoft Research. So it's about content priority based message filtering. Like, for example, if we are sitting here and there's an urgent message that is, that should be known to me at this point of time. But since I am, in silent mode currently, all the messages are suspended unilaterally. There's no way that a particular message, just because it is of critical nature, it gets delivered. So we worked on that, and we devised a system which actually bypasses that. And I have been granted a patent on that after 7 years of hardships, if I may say so. So, sir, I had 2-3 people. Professor Milind Pandey was the third one. So I had these people who guided, who were my guides and who guided me to the right path. But if I may say so, and this is my self-quote, and I'm, propagating to everyone through this video, that success is a vector quantity. It needs the direction of your guide, Professor Frank Stojano here, who will be my informal guide in the future for whatever research we might pursue, and the magnitude of efforts from the student. So it's a vector quantity. Success is a vector quantity. It needs the direction and the magnitude. So this is how it all started. I mean, people come to me and say, sir, I'm very inspired by your journey, and you have so many papers and patents. I say that was a process. It was a gradual process. What matters is the journey, actually. End results are, obviously, we are targeting ICML, NeurIPS, and SIGCHI, and all those conferences. Unisys, which is a security conference, if I'm not wrong. So these are all targets, but the journey is what is more important. That's what I feel.
Right. Yeah. That sounds great. So, closing words. I mean, you come from India, which is a country that is clearly bubbling with intellectual fervor and people who want to improve their lot and are very bright, but need to open up to chances in the world.
Yes.
And so many fantastic students who come here from India and do very well. But they need to be told by someone they trust that it is possible to get out of their village, of their small context, of what the neighbor also does, and so on and so on. And they can look to something more than what the people in their small community have done and tend to do, and so on and so on. Maybe one who has really something that calling in themselves can, like you know, aim to go somewhere else, like here. I mean, here is not the only place in the world that is beyond this horizon. But I guess they would, if I were a bright Indian kid, I would like to hear it from someone who looks like you than someone who looks like me. So tell them what you're going to tell them. You have a smart 10-year-old.
Yes.
Speak to them, speak into the camera.
Yeah, so if I had to guide someone who is from India and 10-year-old, and in fact from anywhere in the world, but more specifically the Indian context, as you said, it's very important.
So many Indian girls, for example, who are very bright.
Yes.
And and traditionally, in most cultures until the last century, I mean, girls in every culture were just pushed down and so on and so on. And now everywhere, there's unfortunately not quite everywhere.
Yeah.
There's an awareness in the world that, you know, just because you have 2 X chromosomes doesn't mean that you're not going to be doing good at stuff where, you know, your physical build doesn't matter. It's just brains, and brains are fine, brain, whatever. And so we are in a historic moment where we can break barriers that have existed for centuries, cultural barriers, and so on. And so you can speak to Indians because they will trust another Indian, to little boys, but to little girls as well, and say, look, you can all go around the boundaries of this very big country, but you know there's stuff outside it as well, and you can be someone on the world scene. And India has had to endure British colonial rule, but as a kind of payoff, you speak English already, which is not the same everywhere else. So you have a kind of step up on many other places. Absolutely. Because you know you can already speak the language that the scientific world speaks. You write a paper, you don't have to think in another language. So you already speak English. So.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so I'll shut up. It was your
no. It's an honor to be here and you know to learn about everything, because for me, as I said, you, Professor Blackwell, Professor Hellman, all are my heroes. So if I had to tell girls and boys who are in their teens just starting to get their foot at their grounding into their career, I would say that first of all, you need to be sure about what you need to do rather than somebody else telling you, because this is something that comes to me so often. Like people, you know, they come to me and they say, "Sir, I want to be like you." So I say I have a very funny anecdotal advice through something that happened. It's very funny. So I gave a lecture at a college, and thereafter one student who was in his undergrad, he met me and he said, "Sir, I want to be very big." I said, "That's good. I mean, all the best to you." So he says, "No, sir, I want to be really big." And again, he struggled with his language, but there's a anecdotal advice in it. So I said, "What do you mean by very big? Like monetary compensation wise? Or, I mean, what do you want to profess by saying you want to be big academically, financially, or what? You want to have a Rolls Royce or something?" So he said, "No, sir, I want to be so big that I want to be bigger than the biggest." So I laughed my wits out and I told him, "See, you know what the issue is? When there's ambition without perspiration," and this is again my self quote which I have invented. So ambition without perspiration of your efforts, in brackets, it's just an illusion. If you don't have a clear pathway, if you don't have a clear clear rationale of what you want to do, someone will guide you. That's for sure. But you need to have it in you. So when it comes to India, when it comes to Indian people, the first and foremost thing that I would like to tell all the children would be to stop with the herd mentality. Don't try to just be an engineer or a doctor. If you find creative arts very interesting, go for it, but be the best that you can in that particular field. Don't go with the herd mentality. Second thing would be to be honest to yourself. That is something many people fail to do. If I may say so, what is the difference between successes and failures? I think it is honesty, because people are not honest with themselves. Like if I falter with some code, I will definitely go and seek help from an expert or even an intern for that matter, because I don't know that. I am not an omniscient person. So this would be one advice, and the third and last advice would be to be extremely diligent with your efforts. You need to put the number of hours initially, because you won't get a knack of it until unless you reach a certain level or stage. So put in the hours, don't give up, don't follow the herd mentality. And for girls who are struggling with their ambitions, because in India there's a lot of dogma associated with a lot of stuff. Girls are still not encouraged in some parts of India, rural India and all, to study. So I would say explain to your parents if you can. If that doesn't work, seek someone's help and make sure that you actually follow some really good influences in your life. And that vulnerable age from 13 to 19, which has a lot of bad influences around you. It could be anything in a very different cultural context. It could be one thing, in another it could be different. So keep those temptations at bay, because if you are able to do that, if you are able to channelize that talent in that particular age, you'll definitely reap the benefits when you'll probably be of my age, because I kept all the temptations at bay. That doesn't mean that I did not falter in my journey. Obviously, it was a topsy-turvy curve, but I made sure that no matter what, I followed what I had to do and worked hard for it. So I think these are the end result. You have to be happy. The most important part is, even when people have success, they cry and they say, "Oh God, I'm not happy." So success is only meaningful when it is balanced by satisfaction. The Bertrand Russell, who is again a Oxford, Cambridge guy, so he has this quote wherein he says, "Knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers." So wisdom is something that you should have. In Indian or in Marathi, my language, we say Hushari is basically intellect and Shahana is basically wisdom. So you can be a Hushar person, you can be intellectual, but you can't be wise. And you can't get wisdom. There's a series on this, a series called Family Man, where he says you can't get wise by the experiences of others. You have to experience it yourself to get wise. So these would be my anecdotal advices to everyone who is starting in their career, sir. And even I'm sure it would be applicable to other people apart from the Indian context and diaspora.
Very good. Well, yeah. And my hope is that you will apply to yourself for your own graduate studies.
Absolutely.
And achieve the great success you deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being still here. Stick a like on the video and say Socrates in a comment to signal you're part of our special club. And I have a couple of questions for you. If you knew a bright teenager who didn't have very clear ideas on what to do after high school, what wise words would you have for them? And at what age would you start telling them? Let us know in a comment.